Two Davids Walk Into a Bar was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
This is David Anderson, and you're listening to Two Davids Walk Into a Bar, and we're doing the history of cable television. With me, as always, is Mr. David Lawler. How are you today, sir?
How are you? I was going to say something clever, and I totally forgot what it was. Oh, I was going to say death to Videodrome and long live the new flesh. Videodrome should be noted. It's a David Cronenberg film from 1984 about a pirate cable station.
And I would say the movie itself was kind of a cable mainstay that you would catch like at 3 o'clock in the morning and be scared shitless.
Yes, and I have a Criterion DVD of it from a few years ago.
Oh, now remember, I have to plug you. I'm going to plug you. I'm going to plug you deep. I'm going to plug you hard.
Okay.
David Lawler is the author of the Vintage Cable Box series of articles that you can find on blissville.net and vhsrewind.com. They're great articles.
We want to talk about Mr. Ted Turner, Mr. Jane Fonda at one point. He was married to her.
And the guy that colorized a bunch of movies.
Yeah, he was the guy, and he was also the guy who owned half of Atlanta. You know,
mm-hmm. all of MGM eventually.
He had a stadium named after him, Turner Field, where the Atlanta Braves played. And he started the Superstation. Well, he didn't start it; he bought it. Basically, I believe that.
I think he bought a UHF station and renamed it WTBS, and that's
Turner Broadcasting. So he's one of these guys. He inherited his money, obviously, but he parlayed that. He's kind of like a Donald Trump guy. He invested in stocks, got richer, acquired properties. So he bought a lot of media companies in Atlanta and in the Atlanta area.
Yeah, that was kind
of he was the owner of the Atlanta Braves for a time.
I would say wasn't kind of getting into like TV stations, radio stations. Wasn't that kind of like sort of the hip thing to sort of diversify in at that time? Because like media was kind of exploding at the time.
Media was exploding, and it was relatively cheap compared to what it is today.
Yeah. And it's almost a license to print money. Once you're established, I mean, ad revenue, the money just keeps coming in.
But he did found WTBS in 1965.
Wow. And
that went on for several years before it became the Superstation, as what it was known, starting in 1976. In 1976, it was a station before it got even bigger in the 80s. It was a station very much like WGN in Chicago. WGN would show Chicago Cubs games, so TBS was the Braves station of that. It became a Superstation, and then it was added to cable packages everywhere.
Wasn't his kind of like, wasn't he sort of inspired by HBO? Because HBO was kind of a local thing, and then they uplinked and became national. Wasn't he sort of inspired by like, hey, I can take my sort of very well established UHF station that's doing well, and I can spread it across the country. Although I realized, like, okay, so he gets the rights to show whatever it is he's showing. Did he have to make special contracts to be able to spread it out nationally, or were there even laws for that? Because you buy for your market. He's spreading it out all over the country.
Well, I doubt it was as controversial as it would be today if you try, because today they don't let you do anything without any kind of oversight or regulation. What I think was done was that he had access to an enormous library, and then he managed to put that library on TBS. In addition to the Braves games, TBS is Channel 8 in my house, and we keep it on constantly because it shows all these reruns of shows. I like it. It's kind of like a comfort food where they would show, I'm talking about the new stuff. Okay, like they show Big Bang Theory, they show Seinfeld, they show Family Guy.
Now through many acquisitions, Ted Turner was basically squozing out of his own company because he would buy. First he bought up New Line. And then he bought, so he bought up New Line, and then he had his Turner company that was like part of like Castle Rock, I think.
Yes.
Castle Rock Entertainment or something. I think he bought them up.
Yeah, I remember. I
and
believe.
then eventually
Shawshank
Time
Redemption
Warner,
DVD has a Turner logo on it, but it also has a Warner Brothers logo, so there's a little bit of Warner Brothers in there too.
Yeah, Time Warner bought up him, and then Time Warner and then they let him run his sort of the Turner section of that, but then when they merged sort of with AOL, that was kind of around the time.
Americom.
Yeah, I know AOL. Remember AOL? I don't.
They ruled the world for about 5 minutes. The world
and they were actually technically, I think AOL actually bought like Time Warner. They were actually worth more at the time or something. But since then,
that's because of the power of any early adoption of a revolutionary product like the internet. That's why AOL did rule the world for about 5 minutes, because you wanted to be on board. Like Yahoo. I mean, like Yahoo was sold to some company for billions of dollars, and it did nothing after that because Yahoo was
gone. And once Google came along, that was it. But when that whole merger happened, that's when Ted Turner, they just like he either cashed out or they said leave, but he made a shit ton of money leaving.
Oh sure,
probably.
yeah.
And now he lives on a farm, and he's old, and he just sort of every once in a while they'll interview him, and he talks about what he thinks, and then he goes back on his farm. And that's fine. You're old, you have a lot of money.
Sometimes
that's what you should do. You got a lot of money, chill out, enjoy it. That's fine. I actually have an early memory of early TBS when it was basically you had it on your cable system, because I was talking about how I had Viacom cable. I had visited a friend down the block, and they were watching some stuff on TBS at the time. It was a cable channel, and it said on Superstation WTBS, which was basically a rebroadcast over satellite to cable systems of a really like strong UHF channel in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So you're basically watching like a really big UHF station in Atlanta, and they were showing I think it was like, coming up next, Get Smart at 7:30. And I said, but it's 4:30. I said, yeah, because it's in Atlanta. Oh, okay.
It was,
This was before I even had cable. Like, this was maybe 6 months before I actually would get cable. So I'm like, ooh, this is it. So then when we got cable, that was like one of the few channels you would get. When you get like, you get basic service, you get like, and we'll get to like USA. So it'd be like USA, WTBS, a few others, your local stations, HBO Showtime.
Well, to be part of that package. I mean, we had it. Yeah. That was on our first cable package in Tennessee. We had and it was popular. It was very popular.
I remember they started producing their own shows. Some of the early stuff that would be like they would buy from other. You remember The Day After, of course.
Yeah.
You remember the British sort of thing called Threads?
Yes, I do. Very depressing movies.
Extremely fucking depressing. Okay, I remember they showed it. I think it was either before or right after.
There were three movies. There was The Day After, there was Threads, and then there was a movie called Testament. These are the absolutely most depressing movies.
I remember that one. Yeah, Testament. That was actually like an American Playhouse. They showed it on PBS.
Yes,
I think.
And Gene Alexander got an Oscar nomination for that.
Because they showed it theatrically too.
Yeah.
They showed it, and I remember they showed it, and because it was East Coast, they showed it like, I think it was like on a Sunday at like 5 o'clock. 5 to 7 or something, and then they had like
it was like an extent because it was like 4 hours, I think, probably. Right?
Oh, okay, maybe it was something like that. Yeah, and
I absolutely remember that. I totally remember.
They had a post conversation after it, because you kind of needed it.
Yeah,
maybe even before, and I think they did that with The Day After. Or maybe they didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they did, and they did it after Testament too. I mean, it was just this was the height of the Soviet and United States arms race.
Come on, this is a good thing to be concerned about. We all want to live.
Of course it was, but you can't help but feel, however well all these movies were very well made, however well they were made, they were very exploitative of people's fears, and it was kind of a kind of propaganda, and it was I remember being scared shitless when I was a kid.
Well, hey, fear is a good motivator. Sometimes it'll help you make the right decision, and when we haven't been blown up yet, so there, we haven't been nuked yet. Most of the time, it would be movies on TBS. It would be movies that he would buy, or movies, and eventually he would end up buying like the MGM library.
He got the MGM library. He was responsible for.
He created TNT, so
Christmas Story nonstop.
Yeah, and then I think that's basically why he created the TNT, which is kind of a TBS spin-off.
Turner Network Television, yes.
To be able to.
But that's later
show
in the
all
story.
of his movies. Yeah, that would be just a little bit later. But okay, so it'd be movies that he would purchase of various quality. It would be reruns of TV shows. I'm thinking like I'm flashing Andy Griffith, Hazel, what am I other like stuff.
Car 54.
Car 54. That was a Nick at Night too.
But that wound up inspiring, and we'll get into Nickelodeon later. But that will wind up inspiring Nick at Night slightly, and also Nickelodeon programming before it switched over to A&E.
And he would, so they would show that, and then they would show movies, and then they would show the occasional like stuff that they would purchase from other countries, like Threads and Be Depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remember they started making their own shows, sort of. I guess maybe they were like produced by other companies. I'm flashing Down to Earth. Remember that one?
No.
That was the one about the like the flapper that became an angel. She died and she helped his family. I remember that.
Oh jeez.
There was like a couple other ones. This was like mid 80s. So like we're talking like 85-ish was when they started producing their own shows a little bit here and there. I think they were produced by the Arthur Company. It's just flashing into my head. And so, but mostly it was just a lot of stuff that he owned and stuff that he would like purchase and show, and slowly it became TBS. Like it went from being WTBS to just TBS.
Yeah, I would say it became TBS probably in the late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah. And I kind of liked it when it was WTBS just because you felt like you were literally getting a like really good UHF station from Atlanta and here on the West Coast. It was kind of cool.
That's what I was referring to, the advent of the superstation like WGN, and then this other station in Philadelphia that we had, Channel 57, which then became a CW affiliate later in the future. But they called themselves a superstation. They were really not. Nowadays, TBS is absolute must-see TV. Yeah. At least in my house, we always have it on because it always shows all the shows I really enjoy.
Well, I mean, remember they purchased the rights to the Star Wars movies, although I think that Disney's trying to buy them back now for the streaming service.
Yeah. And when it comes to late-night talk shows, I think I prefer Conan over anything else. I'm not really into Colbert anymore. I used to love Colbert when he was on Comedy Central.
They booted George Lopez off the air.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him.
And I'm not big on Jimmy Fallon or who's the other guy? Seth Meyers? Not big on him either, but who's the other guy? Jimmy Kimmel. Not really big on him either.
Well, I mean,
I like Conan's humor more. He's actually trying to be funny, which is good. And I learned a lot about other shows coming up, like I don't watch Big Bang Theory. I only watch it on TBS, and I watch Two Broke Girls, of course. And then there's these quirky comedies that they started developing a couple of years ago. A lot of them aren't funny, but some of them are. Shows like People of Earth and Search Party and Wrecked, this seriously unfunny Lost parody that they do. Well, there's this new one coming up called Miracle Workers. It doesn't look particularly funny either, but I'll give it a shot.
It's funny. I don't watch a ton of TBS Net right now because it's basically right now it might as well be a USA.
Well, it's not as fun as it, but USA's at the end of our show.
Yeah, but you probably want to go into CNN now because I pretty much said everything.
CNN was amazing to me. We got CNN, and this created what you might call the news junkie in a way because these people constantly having CNN on their television, and it's like news as it's coming in. And
yeah, it was great for like breaking national news things when things would happen.
There was stuff that, and also because remember before CNN, all you had was your nightly news, basically, right?
Your nightly, and every once in a while they'd preempt whatever soap opera you were trying to watch, so you could you could watch like the Watergate hearings, like
and I only really, I mean, like it seemed like the networks only had like their 5 o'clock news. The local news, right? And then you would have the nightly news, which was network, and that was like 11 o'clock, or was it 11 o'clock? Yeah, like around 11 o'clock before Johnny Carson came on or something like that. And that was it. And then after that, you had CNN. CNN starts this whole wave of the 24-hour news cycle, but then it inspires independent affiliates to do their own news channel show at 10 o'clock. I remember Channel 11 had a 10 o'clock news. In New York, Channel 29 had a 10 o'clock news in Philadelphia, so you would see your independent, even UHF affiliates with their own version of the 10 o'clock news. I remember
there was a thing called the Independent News Network, and it was probably like a federation of independent stations that kind of got together, or maybe they even had like a national bureau and would like have sort of it was probably a non-cable version of CNN.
Probably something that was not like an enormous corporation running it.
Yeah.
Like CNN was. But CNN was where I found out because we had moved down from Philadelphia, down from Philadelphia to Tennessee. We got CNN. And in I believe, May of 1985, there were a series of devastating fires in Philadelphia, and we found out about it on CNN. It was from this cult group called MOVE, M-O-V-E, where they had set fire to one of the row houses in West Philadelphia, and the mayor completely botched the situation. It was very much like a Waco of its time, but it happened in Philadelphia. They dropped a bomb that wound up destroying a whole block of row houses and putting all these people out of their homes. And it became major national news because of CNN's coverage. And then after that, we found out about the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. You remember that guy?
Oh, yeah.
Going to women's apartments, rape and murder people. I mean, it's just, and we found out about this happening in Los Angeles, I believe. That made national news. And then after that, of course, the biggest event of CNN's up to that point, which was the invasion of Iraq after Iraq invaded Kuwait, and it became Desert Storm, and it was like this. They had, their news commentators stuck in Kuwait, hiding under tables, hiding under beds, while people are raiding hotels, explosions everywhere, all kinds of stuff.
Because I mean, the networks certainly have great people in different areas and everything, and they can report it. But CNN was the perfect vehicle for something like that, where you're. Because they're not going to preempt programming for that. Like, they're not going to preempt all, my mom's soap operas for that. But you can go, okay, I want to see what's going on over there. So, you'll get something boring, but at least you'll get what's going on.
You'll get what's going on, and it's like a drug in a way. Watching the news, especially with what's happened now, because CNN inspired other companies. It inspired Microsoft and NBC to merge and form MSNBC.
MSNBC, which, by the way, and we can get on Fox News about being right wing, and we can talk about MSNBC being left wing and whatever. But MSNBC kind of started out as basically a CNN clone, and they've kind of found their audience of sort of left-leaning people that wanted, a certain point of view on news. Now, these kinds of channels, like both MSNBC and Fox News, are very sort of opinion. They have their they're more kind of commentator based, of like this is what our opinion of these people are, and this is what our opinion.
That's what's happened. That's another thing. I wanted to bring this up. The Vietnam War.
All right.
Now, the Vietnam War, a lot of millennials like to believe that the Vietnam War was stopped because hippies or something, flowers and guns. What ended the Vietnam War was the public perception of it after seeing it broadcast in their living rooms.
Yeah,
this was the first televised war, was the Vietnam War. In World War II, all we had was newsreels. Oh, the Allies have taken part of France, and they're driving Hitler out.
Mr. the guy everyone trusted, Walter Cronkite. Even Walter Cronkite was like, America, this is a real problem, or something. I'm completely, totally paraphrasing.
No, he said, America, this is some seriously fucked up shit.
Yeah, something.
And everybody was like, cut his mic. Did he just say that?
Yeah. He kind of let his opinion go, because especially, I mean, if you're a reporter, you're going to see all kinds of shit.
Well, the thing that Cronkite is that rarity. He was considered the most trusted man in America, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But he'd sometimes let his emotions go, like when JFK was shot.
Yeah.
He cried on national television.
Cried a little bit, and then he sucked it right back up. Yeah.
You vastly affected people's perceptions of the war when you see all the atrocity that was committed, and for no good reason. There was no good reason for us to be in Vietnam, ever. It was a stupid war. It cost countless lives, and it destroyed an entire generation. I think Ted Turner had that in the back of his head when he was thinking about CNN. He said, one day there will be something so big that it will change people's minds, and we'll be able to put it on
there. And Henry Kissinger, we have a plan. We're not going to tell you what the plan is, but please vote for us, and then we will do what we need to do, and we will get out. And then, of course, they didn't do anything because he's Nixon.
Yeah.
And but, hey.
Well, both MSNBC and Fox News launched in the same year, in 1996.
Yes.
But the thing about Fox News, this is something, it was obviously purchased by Rupert Murdoch, or he created the Fox Network and then created the Fox News division.
Yeah.
Where you would have a constant shuffling. This is very interesting, that a lot of people who worked for Fox went on to work for MSNBC and vice versa, CNBC. Recruiting within the ranks. That was what journalism actually was back then. Journalism has changed so much since then. I studied journalism in high school. It was about who, what, why, where. That was what journalism was. Now this new variant of opinion and political punditry from people in the know, people who work for the government, spooks, you call them. It's not a racist term.
You're not allowed to call them spooks anymore.
These are spooks. Basically, they're people from that area, Maryland, Virginia, D.C., all growing up with
Mr. David Lawler talking about the spooks in Maryland and D.C.
Prominent in prominent government families get these positions, and then it becomes opinion. So news stops being news because the news is a fire broke out in the warehouse section of downtown. Opinion is now this was started by I don't know, neo-Nazis or Antifa or something like that.
This is the problem that we have in America, and we need to sort of check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. What we need to do is we need to understand when a lot of times people will reporters will just report the news. Okay, then what we will do is people will get mad because somebody said something about somebody that they didn't like, and then they have an opinion, and then the reporter has to defend themselves.
But the reporter should not be in a position. This is my problem with this. The reporter should not be in a position to defend. The reporter should just give you the news.
Okay, I want to bring something.
I want to bring up Covington because they took it well out of hand, just simply. And because we live in this Twitter atmosphere, and we've got these people sitting in on judgment when they shouldn't be. All they should be doing is reporting the facts. They should not be. Opinion is completely uncalled for. The only time we ever heard opinion when we were kids, David, was when the general manager would come on at the end of a broadcast maybe once a week and offer a commentary. That was the only time. Now we've
really
got
grinds my gears.
Yes. Now we have constant opinion. We might as well just call it opinion.
Well,
now.
we're giving our opinions.
I'm giving my opinion of what news has become, and I can't imagine anyone disagreeing with me.
Do you remember this happened recently, and this has actually happened a few times, where the reporter will try to say Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and he'll always end up saying Martin Luther Coon Jr. Day or something to that effect, and everybody will get pissed, and the guy will get fired because he talked a little too fast.
Yeah.
And appeared to sound racist.
Why would anyone ever say that? That's just I could say it 5 times.
Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King.
Junior, if you put the junior in there, that's what throws people off.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I'm doing it.
Okay, well, you should become a reporter then, because you can say things properly.
Welcome to the evening news. I'm Dave Waller. How are you?
You could probably find it. Somebody should put it on YouTube. More than one reporter has done that, and more than one reporter has gotten in trouble. So what you do is you just say Martin Luther King Day. You don't need to put a junior on there. It's Martin Luther King Day. You can't put a coon in there.
Yeah, but he might get fired for not using the junior. And I notice a lot of people say Dr. King. Dr. King. The 9/11 terrorist attacks, of course.
Yes.
But CNN was showing the same stuff because once that happened, every channel was showing it.
Yes.
Even Sci-Fi, even USA, they just switched, and they switched to CNN's feed. Yeah. They went right to CNN's feed. Well, unless you were Fox News, or maybe MSNBC or CNBC, everybody had switched to the CNN feed. Well, you're skipping
over. I mean, not to belittle 9/11, and we'll get back to it, but you're skipping over Challenger disaster. You're skipping over Chernobyl.
That didn't affect me. I'm only going on stories.
You're skipping over OJ.
Oh, yeah, I do remember OJ. God, Jesus, OJ. That was ridiculous. The verdict came down on my birthday.
I'm not just talking about the verdict. I'm talking about before when they were chasing him in the Bronco.
Yes. No, well, I remember that they interrupted a Knicks basketball playoff game, and everybody got pissed here.
to show all the black people celebrating.
Well, no. To show the Bronco.
Oh, to show the Bronco. Okay.
As for all that was a very disturbing, divisive day in our history. But it's, again, the Challenger disaster, I was in school when that happened, and they brought us all into the room to watch it on TV. Apparently, we needed to know this in school.
Yeah, it's national news. I mean,
well,
lost actually 2 space shuttles
why?
Since.
It's because they publicized it because there were 2 women going up.
Well, not just 2 women. It was like a teacher was going up. Remember?
Well, yeah, that was the woman. That was Christine McCall.
It was a woman, but there was another one. But hey, we had Sally Ride. She didn't die.
Yeah, that's true. But these people went up there. It was highly publicized, and it fucking exploded, and it was just it was awful. But okay. No, it wasn't 9/11, David.
No, it wasn't 9/11. I'm just saying that basically all of these sort of national stories kind of establish CNN as when the shit goes down, you go to CNN.
Yeah,
that's basically what I'm trying to say.
And the other networks know when the shit goes down, you hook into CNN's feed.
I mean, when you have when Darth Vader is your spokesman,
yes.
This is CNN. And Larry King, my goodness.
Larry King.
Larry King, Larry King talking to Dr. Atkins about keto diet and like.
Well, what I find very interesting, and this is part of the political division going on in this country, a lot of the people who work for Fox News now worked for CNN back then.
Yeah,
very interesting. Very interesting how everything has become divided along those lines. So now we're looking at, well, if you want the conservative or libertarian perspective, you go, because I say Fox News is more libertarian than anything else now.
You can think that. That's okay.
And Fox Business as well. You go to Fox
Lou Dobbs,
if you want.
He's a total douche. I don't like
Lou
him
Dobbs
either.
is another one who flipped. He was a flipper. And if you want the, I guess, Democrat or liberal perspective, and sometimes even leftist justification, you'll go to a CNBC more than a MSNBC. I think CNBC is more slightly more radical.
I thought CNBC was more sort of like a business channel.
They do business, but they do the news, and a lot of people watch them. I used to watch Morning Joe all the time. I loved it. But I feel that when the news starts to get a little more radical in their leanings and when they start to make outrageous claims, and then they start to believe things that aren't necessarily accurate, like what happened with BuzzFeed and all that, and they start to back it up, and then they start to pass judgment on a bunch of kids from Covington or something, it gets to be less news and more of this kind of sensationalism, like kind of tabloidy kind of stuff. And because of that, I don't trust anything anyone ever tells me about anything until the facts actually come in. They're doing fact-checking on Trump's State of the Union the other day. I'm like, all right, how many times did their lie counter go off? I mean, how are they smelling lies? How can you tell when someone is lying? You don't know.
Because he'll say something, and then you check it, and it's like, well, that's
There used to be an old joke. How can you tell when a lawyer lies? He opens his mouth. Sometimes you can use that joke for politicians, too. But the problem is you don't know a lie until you know the truth. That's why I always reserve judgment on everybody. For good or ill, CNN was the inspiration for all of this. And it's now why it's almost like if you don't have news, if everything's going well, if we're all happy, that's boring. No one's going to want to cover that, and it would kill the news industry.
Well, life is pain. What can I say?
Life is joy. Life is whiskers on kittens, David. It's puppy dog tails. It's your daughter's face smiling at you.
I don't have any of those, and you're not an employed man, so that's probably why you're happy. You don't have to work like I do.
You got a cat. Okay, Mr. Working Man. You have a cat at least. You have Jerry, right?
I have Jerry. I have Jerry and Shadow when she comes out, yeah.
Shadow.
Yeah.
That's a great name. I like that name for a cat.
Mm-hmm. It is.
People should name their cats unusual, quirky, funky names. They shouldn't name them weird human names like Susan. If I ever saw a cat named Susan, I'd shit my pants.
I had a cat named Gremlin.
Gremlin is a great one, or Gizmo, or Mogwai.
Yeah, Mogwai, a whole bunch of those. Yeah.
I have 3 cats. I have Siren, I have Little, and I have Sushi. Mm-hmm. Now, who names a cat Sushi? Well, we do. All right, let's talk about Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Nickelodeon. Okay, now, when I was a kid, when we had the cable, 1984, I wasn't really interested in the kids' programming, but I did talk to my wife. She talked about a few key shows that she really enjoyed on Nickelodeon. Of course, we're talking about You Can't Do That on Television.
Of course.
With Alanis Morissette and all the weird shit.
A Canadian show, by the way.
Canadian, eh? Here's some slime, eh?
Yeah.
But she also talked about a show that she really loved called The Tomorrow People. I believe it's some kind of science fiction thing.
I think that's one of those things that I feel like that was not Canadian. That was like purchased from like Australia or Britain or something. Like that was some sort of like another country show.
Like overwhelmingly Australian.
Could have been Canadian. I don't know.
And they would also show cartoons, but a lot of like original programming, produced, shot on video, that kind of stuff.
later stuff, Degrassi Junior High. I mean,
all the Degrassi stuff. We talked about the first
all the Degrassi stuff. I mean,
iteration of it last time.
We talked about like I found like, and you found it is like it's actually started in '79 and in Canada, and then they started showing them on Showtime, and I told you about like those were my early memories of like the kids on Degrassi Street. Yeah, finally what I figured out what it was, and then like a few years later, the Degrassi Junior High would start.
Degrassi Junior High, and then Degrassi High, and then Degrassi The Next Generation, and then Degrassi Deep Space Nine, and then Degrassi Voyager. I remember that.
Yeah.
And Degrassi Enterprise, and finally Degrassi Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then the really unpopular one, Degrassi Nemesis. That's the one where most of the kids die.
Yeah.
After the principal rams the high school with another high school. I figured out I traced the origins of Nick at Night. It's because at the end of their programming cycle for about 2 hours before they switched over, because Nickelodeon back then was not a 24-hour channel. And at 10 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, they would switch over to A&E, and A&E, maybe 10 o'clock, I would say.
This may have been, was this around the time that they would, now was this on your local stage, on your local cable, or would they literally switch over?
They would switch over.
On a satellite, like they would share space on a satellite.
There would be a little transition piece where Nickelodeon is going off the air. Next on A&E. And it would show that.
Because that
actually, no, it was a very
was
delicate, gentle male voice going, next on A&E.
A&E was like part, because like now A&E, I believe, is owned by like, it's still owned by like NBC and ABC or something.
Yes.
And at the time, I think it was owned by like a few other companies. And
it was,
just, like,
A&E was like it was a small channel, actually. It was a very small channel. It was kind of like what public TV would be, public television, PBS, but they would show all the stuff that at that time, I'm talking about 1984. Then it would expand and become more.
What I remember about Nickelodeon is interesting, though. My first memories of Nickelodeon was when I wasn't supposed to have it, because what would happen was we had MTV first, okay, and we'll get to MTV.
Yeah.
But what would happen is, and this happens occasionally, and this goes back to when I would have the dish. Every once in a while, they would switch transponders.
Right.
And when they would switch transponders or satellites, and a lot of times it was Nickelodeon was owned by the same company that owned MTV. So what would happen was, like, maybe they'd flip satellites. So like the transponder that MTV was on would be Nickelodeon for like a few hours before they figured out, oh, we got to move our dish. So I'd get Nickelodeon for a few hours, like in the morning. I'm like, oh, Nickelodeon. And then it would go back to being MTV. So and they figured out that it was in the wrong place.
They had this one guy at the cable station or whatever. He had one job. All he had to do was move that satellite.
He had one job, yeah.
Yeah, Nickelodeon, I remember for a time it did say at the end of any of its programs, it would always say copyright MTV Networks. And this was before MTV was bought.
Now, and Nickelodeon, I believe, was also part of, like, and MTV. They were part of, like, Warner. I mean, we'll get into that. Maybe we have that conversation, or had that conversation of, like, MTV, Nickelodeon, and I think like one other channel, and the movie channel were actually owned by Warner. And then, like, through a series of, like, studios trying to buy them and then antitrust weird things, eventually Viacom ended up getting the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of how it worked out, of like legally, that was the only, like, this company can legally purchase it. So they purchased it.
Right.
Or something like that. So like, but it's funny how MTV and Nickelodeon used to be, and Movie Channel used to be part of what would eventually become part of HBO and AT&T and Time
they
Warner.
would have this, they would have this block of old sitcoms that they showed at the end of the night before they switched over to A&E.
I'm remembering now. What year are we talking about? Because I remember when
this is '84, because Nick at Night started the year after.
Oh, okay. Because
they would actually show these very obscure. They were obscure for their time and became popular as a result of their replay on Nick at Night later. But they would show stuff like The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
That was the one. Now my Dobie Gillis memories are. I think we got Nickelodeon. We must have not gotten Nickelodeon until like 86 or 87 when we got that huge expanded basic, when we got like Discovery Channel or something. So, and it may even show up on that list I sent you. It may or may not.
You don't. Yeah, your first lineup here does not have Nickelodeon on it.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't get it until I'm because my Nickelodeon memories are like.
I still don't see it here in the second lineup either.
Wow, and that's 86. So yeah, we probably didn't get it till 87. I'm gonna guess.
That's true.
Yeah. So yeah, and what I remember was Dobie Gillis, My Three Sons. Oh, what else?
There was also the Donna Reed show.
Donna Reed, yeah, because I remember a commercial about Donna Reed Hallism. You might have Donna Reed Hallism. I remember that.
And then also the Bob Cummings show, Bachelor Father.
I don't remember that.
Those were, again, obscure. Bachelor Father with John Forsythe, Bob Cummings, of course.
Yeah, but I will say Dobie Gillis was my jam. I'm like, that
but
was
then they also started to show the Dick Van Dyke Show, and they started to show Mary Tyler Moore, too. Oh, also the Loretta Young Show, which is kind of a...
I'm not remembering that.
Yeah,
I Spy. I remember that.
I Spy. And then after that, Nick at Night starts in 1985, and that's when people really begin to see, like, the Dick Van Dyke Show was a very popular show when it was on originally in the network.
Yeah.
And Mary Tyler Moore was too, but they had been off for so long that it became very nostalgic, and those shows became very popular again, and people would be watching them.
If you watch Nick at Night now, it shows from when, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago,
whatever
like
it is. They're
90s.
probably showing Friends, because every damn
Friends
network
was Nick
shows
at Night,
Friends.
I think, for a while.
Every and probably Cheers too.
Cheers. Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. There's something about the comfort factor of old black and white TV shows. You like to have them on. And it differs from today's television. It's not the same, and that's why you get so many of these these antenna.
Yeah.
Like
and
MeTV, Comet, and they're all showing old TV shows.
Yeah, they're Chris Cooling's favorite channels, really.
Yeah. Chris Cooling, Forgotten TV.
Yeah, great shows.
Can you tell me anything about TV Land? Because I don't remember watching.
Okay,
TV
Land was basically now. Nick at Night is a block. Nick at Night is a block on Nickelodeon, because it'd be Nickelodeon, and then at night they would show the sort of, I wouldn't even call it adult programming, but like, more aimed at grown-ups reruns.
Like
little kids,
Grant and
little kids don't give a crap about that. I mean,
Falcon Crest Dynasty.
I mean, okay, like perfect example would be like on Nickelodeon during the day they would show Dennis the Menace, because that's aimed at kids.
Right. Yeah.
So, or maybe My Favorite Martian or something like that. That's more aimed at like kids. And they had like an afternoon block where that was a little more aimed at like, and then in the morning they had like the young kid stuff. Like in the morning, this is a little more later in the 90s, but I'm thinking like Eureka's Castle. Remember that one? Eureka's Castle?
I do remember that.
That would have been 90s or something. But basically, or like what's that one? The Blue's Clues.
Yeah, Regan watched that.
There's stuff for really young kids. There was a show that it was called Pinwheel.
Well, after I remember when Regan was born, she was very little, a toddler, and they had a network called Nick Jr., which was for the little,
like all
kids.
Of those young programs, like all day. This is when like you started having like digital channels, and they could cram more on.
Yeah.
But so TV Land was basically a whole channel that was the stuff that would be on Nick at Night, and then eventually TV Land would become, they put original programming on there too. Like there's a show called Hot in Cleveland.
Hot in Cleveland. Oh God, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like original programming for that, but that probably be one later. But I think TV Land was basically a whole channel of Nick at Night type stuff, like just reruns, most of it.